strong women come to mind, like immediately Hillary Clinton. Also the women in my family, my sister, my mom, are just strong, educated women, and that's my whole idea of feminism, is the idea of like an independent, educated kind of like living for yourself type of woman.
It's also really easy to think of like, extremists, like people like, women protesting for a thing. But I think ultimately feminism, when I hear that, I think of a movement for like fair pay, equal representation, like from guys that I know. To a degree, when you hear the word feminism, you think of like, man haters, that like they actually want to almost get into a superior position.
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think of feminism is the women's suffrage movement, and how important it was to sort of liberate women from the patriarchal society that kept them from voting. And when I think of modern feminism, I'm really reminded by that, because the enemies that modern feminists face aren't as codified or as explicit as they were in the 19th century and the early 20th century, but they're just as powerful, and the kind of things that women are fighting for right now are of the same proportions, equal pay and equal consideration. And I think to really achieve those things, it's going to take the same tactics and the same ability to stand up to men and say, we deserve equality, because women absolutely do.
I think there's sometimes a problem with feminism that, the feminists, that there are like extreme feminists who believe that like everything like about women is wrong nowadays and stuff like that. And I honestly think we're going the right way. We're going the positive way, and we don't have to be too much of a radical to change how we do things in order to make women equal. Because we got pretty equal, in my opinion.
I think to judge an entire group by the extremists is sad, and I think it happens, and I think that is actually one of the bigger roadblocks to feminism today. The women that go out and say men are evil, men can't do anything, men can only hurt. I think those are the ones that are really holding back the feminist movement, because as much as they want to empower women and kind of progress with the movement, they're turning a lot of people away, and they're turning a lot of people off, and no one wants to listen to someone who hates them. So then immediately all the men just kind of turn away and say, oh, just those crazy feminists again.
I actually think we're starting to move away from gender roles, and I think that should continue. There's some things that like can't change just because of biology. Like women are still primarily, they have to carry children and give birth. But apart from that, especially now with more women in the workforce, you're actually seeing, in some instances, with the woman earning more than her husband. So I think they're starting to disappear, but at the same time, gender roles are very like inherently, they're culturally a part of us, because even from like the stage of like being a little infant, like you're constantly just the language we use, we refer to like little girls as like princesses, and like we just boys for the other, and you always have like the blue blankets and the pink blankets, even like at the very beginning.
It occurs along a spectrum, because I definitely wouldn't fit inside the man box, or this conception of masculinity we have, and I certainly know girls who wouldn't fit inside this box of femininity that we have. It definitely occurs along a spectrum, and I think we're moving to a society that's much more accepting of that, and much more based upon what you identify with, as opposed to how you're designated by society as a child.
In my country, which is South Korea, we are very patriarchal. So the Asian culture tends to put more emphasis on fatherly figure and how important they are, and I guess sometimes that kind of thinking can be dangerous, because or Asian culture sometimes tends to demean the role of woman.
But one thing that my grandma kind of taught me growing up was that that the man should be able to provide for the family, and if the woman wants to get a job, that's her choice.
I think that some might argue that there's double standards, because if you look at the military, women are allowed to serve in the military, but they're not allowed to be frontline soldiers as men are, and men would argue that it's not fair that women insist on getting equal pay and all the sorts of issues that arise from women's rights. But I think that it makes sense just on that example why women aren't serving on the front line, just because of the different problems that can arise from that. But I feel just in general that women are treated differently and are treated equally on loads of environments.
Well, I would say the only thing, just that the fact that I'm physically stronger, which doesn't make a difference in the modern day workforce. On top of that, I can't really think of anything that I would have that a woman doesn't in terms of just thinking capacity. If anything, I think the stereotype of women is that they tend to overthink things compared to guys.
I have a tough time seeing women in a high-ranking military role. I think that sometimes, and I think that's more often than men, women think more emotionally rather than logically, and I think that can be a huge disadvantage in a high-pressure war scenario, and I think it can end up having worse results than if a man were making that decision.
You have to be careful what you say in terms of speech, because you can subconsciously reinforce gender stereotypes and kind of be fighting against the feminist movement without realizing it. If you've heard of the expression you throw a girl, guys, so if you're associated with doing something bad, you're associated with being a girl, and that needs to change, because that's also part of this idea. People are constantly, we may not be consciously thinking about, but we're subconsciously thinking about gender.
I believe as a male, it's good to be involved in some of the feminist groups here on campus and be involved in some of the events as well that they hold, such as Take Back the Night and other things like that.
I think it's very important that with the feminist movement, they stay empowered, and it's done by themselves, because it's not very helpful if there's a feminist movement that's completely run by men. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think men can be an integral part of it and can do things, but for me personally, I think the best thing I can do is to stay out of the way and empower the females around me.
I don't think it's a man's job to help women in any way. If they choose to, if a given man chooses to help the feminist movement, that's completely fine. But I don't think it's the responsibility of men to help women.